G'day, it's Payney and Deegs here from Extreme Boardriders, the next round of the Boardroom Chat.
Yeah, been a good string of waves, local.
Autumn's been sick.
Yeah, we've both been getting in the water, which is great news.
Yep.
And one of our customers, Heath, brought up with me in the water the other day, talking about down south, what would you, doing a video, but with maybe shorter, high volume boards versus longer mid-lengths or that sort of thing. And we thought, well, hell,
Yeah, good.
let's have a yaffle about it, hey?
Yeah, good question, Heath. And we do get asked this a bit in store, when people are, they don't have a bunch of boards to ride. How do they sort of adjust their quiver to riding weaker waves? And quite often we're going to ask, well, what else do you have in the range?
Yep.
Of course, even, when we're buying boards, we also go, well, where does this fit into my range?
Sometimes we cross it over a
It's
little
an
bit.
embarrassment of riches when you work in here, and you always find an imagine gap. But when you're trying to get those well-defined group of boards so you can cover the best range of conditions, surfing, there are questions you need to ask. So it came down to Heath basically wanted to know the differences between a rider shorter, nubbier board.
Yep, flat.
Yeah, as opposed to a longer board but the same volume.
Yeah, that like for like in the volume category, but
Yep.
what's going to be more beneficial, shorter, fatter, or the length?
The advantage to each. So, good question, Heath. So, first we're going to talk about having a shorter board with high volume. So, shorter board with high volume, call it a groveler, not quite a step down board, certainly, something along this. Feb's Fish is that generally designed as a small wave board in that sort of waist to maybe head high, open face, maybe waves, but a bit flatter, crumblier, reformy sort of waves we're talking. Well, I guess we're talking a little bit about Middleton.
Definitely.
That Gore South Coast stretch where it sort of crumbles, reforms, and how do you get onto them and how do you glide through the sections. The advantage of riding a smaller board generally of a volume, so both these boards I'm looking at, they're about 34 litres. And what that's going to do, at 34 litres and quite short in a 5.7, it's going to make the board more nimble.
Yes.
So obviously a shorter board, it's going to be snappier.
Awesome in the pocket.
Awesome in the pocket, really quick whippy cutbacks, that sort of thing. It's nimble in the water. Hey, it's easy to handle in the water. If you've got a bit of traffic, you can get that short board around people, which when it's small, generally more people in the surf.
Yep.
So what these boards are going to do, they're going to enable you to have a board that throws it around, bunch of fun, gets on the waves pretty good purely because of the volume. And when we're talking these boards as well, they're going to have quite flat rocker lines.
Yeah. Which is super friendly for down south. You need to be able to generate. And I've found with this Feb Fish, it's blown my mind a little bit. As soon as you get your weight on that front foot, it takes off. It has so much pace, and I've found it really exciting too. So it is, adds into this conversation that we've brought up and discussed.
It does, we're talking really boards here at the moment more so than fins, but obviously 20s create speed in weaker conditions. Big wide base fin create lots of drive.
Yep.
Flat entry rocker, and generally a wide board. This board's over 20 wide, 20 and a half wide there. So wide boards have a bit better glide. These boards generally have a very flat deck on them. So if a board might be, say, 2 3/4 inches thick in the middle, this carries a lot of foam out the rails, then it rolls into the rail. Other boards are going to be same thickness in the middle, but they're going to have a rolled deck, so the rails become quite a bit finer. The advantage of having those chunky rails, if you're trying to glide through weak sections, plenty of flotation.
Yeah. Let's compare it then to the old Baron.
Yep.
We talk something a little bit more length. Again, something I talked a bit, that mid-length category. I spent a lot of time surfing. Funnily enough, I've talked you into this board here once, another one.
Yeah.
But still full in the nose, a really good outline. But I found personally, since I moved to SA, length was really helpful down south.
Yeah.
So, what are your, comparing it to that sort of thing? What are our bonuses?
So, that's a 5.7 at 34 litres, there's a 6.4 at 37 litres. One of the major advantages you get with a longer board is it's going to glide a lot better. And that's glide for paddling.
Yep.
When you're trying to get onto a weak wave.
Yep.
And it's also glide on the wave face. You can tend to put your foot down and just trim a little bit. Some with shorter boards, you've got to keep them turning a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might like that cruisy, drawn out sort of turn. So the advantages are like the same volume has got to paddle a little bit better, just with that waterline length when you get it up to speed, it wants to keep going.
Yep.
One of the other advantages of riding the longer board is that when it's windy offshores, it's such a simple thing. That splashing in your face, it's a lot further away. A 6.4 compared to a 5.7. You get that last moment you get spray in the face from a 15 knot offshore.
Yep.
which in SA we get some pretty windy days here. It just puts it further away from you, so it's less disruption, glides the board a lot better, that's for sure. The disadvantage, of course, compared to this little board, it's not terribly nimble. That's a big long board there to whip around through the turns, which
maybe not this one, but yes, relevant to the size of the rider. Again, these are your boards.
These are the sort of size boards I ride. So 6'4" might, for me, feels quite long.
Yeah.
But this has got a moderate entry rocker line, so it still glides quite good. It's got a little bit of width up the nose. This is the old Baron from JS, and it's going to be quite easy to paddle, good all rounder. The other advantage of riding this bigger board, when you've got 34 litres and you stretch it out, your rails become a lot more refined and lower. So having a refined rail, it means basically there's more foam taken out of them. This sort of board here's got a little bit chunkier rails. The advantage of that slightly more refined rail is that if you want to ride this board in better waves, it's actually going to hang in there a lot better.
Yep.
What we don't want when we're riding bigger, better waves, we don't want big fat rails. So they're just going to sit on top of the water and the board's going to start to levitate and skid around and get out of control.
Not what you need in big waves, that's for sure.
You don't. You want to feel engaged.
Yeah.
Right from that first bottom turn you do is super important. If you're skipping around it, can upset the whole wave just about.
Yeah.
So having that longer board, the same volume, refine the rails, a little bit narrow nose, a little bit narrow tail. They're not massive, these boards. That's going to help you feel the board feel quite a bit more engaged. So basically the bottom line is the shorter board is going to be more nimble and feel like a short board. Quite a bit more playful in the pocket. The longer board is actually going to paddle a little bit better, maybe a bit more versatile. And if you're considering you were going to go to Indo or the West Coast, you go, I wouldn't mind a board that still paddles over there. You might have a performance short board, you might not have a step-up board. You might look at something like this to go,
hybrid.
A bit of a hybrid sort of thing. Yeah. Maybe when you're tired and lazy in the afternoon, like me, and or if there's a bit of a crowd around, you go, oh, there's a bit of crew out there, I've got a deal that want a bit of paddle power. That's when you might consider one of these sort of more mid-length hybrid sort of boards.
Yeah, and I guess we go back to the question, what is more beneficial down south? It does come down to the information we've given, but for the person, so if you're finding that maybe you're getting plenty of waves, but your board's just not fast enough or not getting around those dud sections, then something a bit smaller and nimble is going to work perfectly because it's got a flatter rocker line to what you might be surfing.
Totally.
If you are finding you're leaning on the other side, of which I've found a lot at times, is that I just run out of gas or I'm not paddling overly well, and it is a long takeoff down in Middleton. Something like this that just gives you that much more glide and user friendliness around it is probably where you need to be sussing and looking. We've got a few of these on demo, which is such a handy thing. We've done the Big Baron, which has been super well loved down south. We've got that Fat Fish on now, which I'm absolutely loving. And this old Baron hasn't lost any love with me either, so that's on probably my favourite 3 boards there. But plenty of options to see how people kind of find it. Do a bit more research in the water on some of these boards.
Come out and talk to us. It's I think it's it's a personal thing, because sometimes you find a very tall person's not going to really want to ride a little 5'5" board when they're paddling at the nose is about there. For you, you're not really.
Definitely. I've found that's been challenging. Not challenging, but definitely a learning curve with the Fat Fish. Is that I've got a smaller landing zone. A big guy.
You get a bigger sweet spot and along the board, more forgiving when you paddle up and down the board, therefore a little more forgiving when you pop to your feet, you're not quite in the right spot, you can readjust. These are going to be more reactive. That's the nature of short boards, and that's the fun of them. So we hope this helps you. There's a bunch of endless questions about surfboard and surfboard design. Remembering volume isn't just the number on its own, it's the foam distribution. Where is that foam in the board in your 34 or 38 litres? Is it a short nubby thing, chunky rails? That's what it's going to do. You stretch that volume, you spread it out, narrow nose, narrow tail, lower rails. That board's going to handle different conditions better. So come and have a chat whenever you like. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel, getting lots of good feedback about it. And again, you got any questions, hit us up, in store, down the beach.
We love it.
Via socials. We want to hear what you want to hear. So come and talk to us.
As always,
see you soon.